Good day. So for today, we present our research proposal titled How Philippine Government Respond to the Needs of Filipinos During Pandemic. So the first speaker is yours truly, Claveria Arceli, and the second speaker is Zamora Jane Ann. Next slide, please.
So in chapter 1, introduction, next slide. So in the introduction, we the researcher had give some information about the title that we chose, which is How Philippine Government Respond to the Needs of Filipinos During Pandemic. We input the meaning of pandemic and government, which are the readers can easily understand our research. We may also add the Philippine status when the pandemic started, and we end up this introduction in putting up a question that this problem can be resolved or Filipinos should embrace this new normal. Next slide.
So our statement of the problem is the pandemic was manifest to decline our economy dealing with increase of cases. So we all know that coronavirus outbreak has already led to a major health crisis in several countries and to major disruption of the global economy. Yet the situation is likely to become even worse in the coming weeks and months, and the economic fallout from pandemic might represent one of the biggest shocks of recent decades.
So, and the objective of the study is our study aims to determine the capability of government to provide the needs of Filipinos. The second is identify the government action to surpass this problem in our society. And the last is to know the level of satisfaction of Filipinos to the response of government this amid of pandemic. Next slide, please.
So our significance of the study, we all know that coronavirus is a big challenge to our daily life, but also to our government. We all know that government are not ready for this crisis that we're experiencing because they are not financially prepared for economy damages, and also the government are vulnerable in planning and management of the said crisis, including the health status of their citizen beside of it. They all have control in terms of hospital accommodation of every patient in day-by-day crisis, occurring such as bed capacity and lack of professional personnel. Aside from this, many Filipinos are lost their job because of the cessation of production and business. The effect of this, many Filipinos are hungry in the midst of the pandemic, especially the poor. It's a big help for Filipinos to raise awareness of government officials to fund human needs in the midst of crisis and be prepared for the possibility that will happen in our country when our economy collapses. So since then, we all know that our government is always indebted to the other country to provide that needs of Filipinos in the midst of disaster and scarcity. So this problem are not easy to solve, but this research eliminate the government to make prepared to the possible crisis that can be experienced in the future and to gather a data on how the government can act and to provide for the needs.
Next slide, please. So in chapter 2, next slide, review of related literature. So we the researcher took only two references to support our study. The first one is from Zheng Yan, 2020. He wrote in his article the different method of social isolation that every country used, like voluntary self-isolation, mandatory quarantine, stay-at-home order, and etc. It is for the safety of people and to control the number of people infected by the virus. The second reference or the last reference that we took is from Anna Uy 2020. She included to her article that the government respond and how they take steps to mitigate the situation and impact of the COVID-19 outbreak in our country. She also added the important response of the government to address and defeat the virus, like the Philippine government established the One Command Hospital Center or OCHC that launched last August 2020. This was a referral system between private and public hospital, and then she of Bayanihan Hill as one act and many more.
Our framework of the study is the structure that support the research study, where the idea and Substructure are for form also explain import the composition of main concept of research study. So the theoretical framework discussed by Jane Zamora.
In theoretical framework, in this part of research, we the researcher input here why our research problem is need to be studied. Because we want to show to the future researcher and to our readers the situation of Philippines when pandemic happened and what are the Philippine government taken steps to resolve this problem that until now we are facing this problem. We also input we also input some of the Philippine government rules and regulation during pandemic. Next slide, please.
So also on March 25, 2020, the Republic Act that passed by President Duterte further called Bayanihan held as one act of Republic Act 11469, which is the target is the low-income household that affect by ECQ, which the primary objective is to sustain the citizens of the Republic that hit by the said pandemic crisis, and additional also to mitigate spread of COVID-19 that care of DSWD general notice in development and set. And then I will ask about this during his meeting with cabinet official at Malacanang Palace on Monday night. Until now, the Philippine government still enduring the economic crisis and still undertaking what it can do in the needs of the nation, hoping to ease ahead of time on this global pandemic crisis as well seeking the help and cooperation by Filipino citizens.
Next is arguments. We include here the problem of Philippine government when they implement the resolution for this crisis, like the SAP or Social Amelioration Program, which house to house to less a physical contact, and people will not going outside to get their cash assistance. But the things happened and they decided to give it to barangay officials and they distribute to people by going to their barangay hall and having a physical contact to other people. And also, we emphasize the lack of PPEs, equipments, and medicine that the medical frontliner need to defeat the virus. Next.
So the scope and limitation, this paper focuses the government action to defeat the virus and how they provide the necessity of their constituents. So this study takes a lot of time to research and analyze. So the researchers having difficulty to gather information because of the protocol that needs to follow. So the materials and other references that it had in this paper is provided by researchers, and taking some references it came from the site that related to this study.
So in chapter 3, the methodology, next slide po. The researcher used qualitative method as for their research. So the researchers define qualitative as a distinguishing attribute of the person.
In our research design, the purpose of this study is that the readers become aware on what steps has the government taken to meet the needs of its constituents. The design approach that researcher use is discourse analysis for the transparency of the researchers to their readers. Next slide, please.
So in unit of analysis, the researcher focuses the study on how Philippine government take an action to the needs of Filipinos, citizens in impeding health issues, and how or what detailed plan they have in terms on unpredictable pandemic crisis to manage the economic recession and countrymen of it.
So in our sample plan, we use cluster sampling to select some cluster based on our analytical framework. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's all. That's our research proposal. Thank you for listening.